And we're live. Hey, everybody. GDP here in the Snooth Studios. I'm joined today by Roger Kugler. Thank you for coming, Roger.
Thank you for having us.
Great to have you here. We're here to talk about Ribera del Duero. Old vines, great wines, a fascinating place. Before we get started, Roger, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself so we know where everything's coming from?
I grew up in Missouri, where I still live. I run a farm there. My family's been there for over 100 years. I got into wine when I was living here in New York City, and restaurant work was my day job. Fell into it, loved it, got my sommelier certificate, ended up in a Spanish restaurant, fell in love with Spanish wine. When I left the restaurant industry, the Drink Ribera campaign was starting. I signed on board, and that's where I've been ever since. I've also done a lot with sherry. I actually won the top sommelier at the 3rd International Copa de Jerez in 2009.
Which is a huge honor.
So, it was a lot of fun, too.
I can imagine so. That's definitely one good thing about this business is we tend to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, wine is a love job.
It is indeed. Yes. You better get your satisfaction there because you're not getting anyplace else. So, a little bit of a primer for people just to let people know where we're coming from, what we're talking about. We're talking about the Ribera del Duero, which is in the center of northern Spain, really.
It's directly north of Madrid, about halfway between Madrid and the North Atlantic, just straight north, straight up the highway. It's an average range of about 71, I hear it described everything from 71 to 90 miles long and about 22 miles wide. We're just under 3,000 feet above sea level, which is really, really high. It's one of the highest elevations for red wine production in the world and certainly in Europe. Consequently, you have a very, very harsh climate. Our current motto is no place for the timid. And making wine here, we're talking about a love job, making wine here is a love job. You have a climate that the locals describe as 9 months of winter and 3 months of hell. Winters will hit 5 degrees below zero and stay there with deep snows. Summers, that really, really short, intense summer, will hit 105 degrees during the day, drop to 70 degrees at night, go back up the next day. There's heavy winds, there's hail, there's everything you could think of. If you notice the vineyards, we'll talk a little about the topography later on in the presentation. There is no grass allowed to grow between the vines here because every bit of energy has to go into those vines. So that whole growing season is nothing but work, 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 work. And it's a phenomenal place to make wine. Because of that amount of work, you don't get bad wines here. And I know that sounds like PR mumbo jumbo, but it's really true. You have to work so hard to make wine.
It totally does sound like PR mumbo jumbo. And it may have not been true 10 or 12 years ago, but today, I mean, you would have to really search for poorly made wine.
Yeah. It's so hard. You have to make good wine here. There are places where you can stick the vine in the ground, go to Madrid, live for 11 months of the year, come back and make your wine, take a vacation. You can't do that in Ribera. You are on this year-round.
So, and today there are about 300 wineries in the DO.
Under 300.
Little under 300. So that's a tremendous amount of growth in the region from 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
From the 1970s, there were average about 15 wineries that were producing and making money. It was because of Alejandro Fernandez. When he made his money in the engineering, as an engineer making machinery for the beet industry, then he wanted to make wine. Everybody said, you're crazy, just forget it, whatever. He started making wine using an old 16th century wine press that they had on the property. Parker discovered him about 10 years later, and now we're up to just under 300 wineries. It is considered one of the great wine regions of the world, and of course, Vega Sicilia is one of the best wineries in the world and is located within Ribera del Duero.
Absolutely. It's a beacon of quality,
yes.
And I think that also sort of helps to drag everybody up. People must taste those wines and say, this is what is possible. It's a very aspirational thing, I would imagine, to have them as a neighbor.
Well, Vega Sicilia, most Spaniards like to be buried with a bottle of Unico in one arm and Valbuena in the other.
As long as they're empty and I've drunk them before I've died, I'm perfectly supporting. You're taking Magnums?
Magnums, yes.
Magnums, a 68 under one arm, 70
so
under the other.
So it's harder to dig me up and take them later.
So before we get further into everything, I know that you guys out there, cameras up here today, you guys out there are already drinking, because if you're not, you're silly people. Hopefully you started with the Rosado. So we're going to just pour a little Rosado for ourselves. And I hope you guys are enjoying it out there. This is 100% Tempranillo.
It's 100% Tempranillo. In this region, Ribera is limited to, everything has to be at least 75% Tempranillo to be released with the money-making stamp, which you'll find on the back of the bottle. It's, I think we're going to get that up there for the camera, right there. They are allowed to blend with Cab, Merlot, Garnacha, Malbec, and Albio. I don't know anyone using Albio.
Albio is the white variety.
A white varietal. The only white varietal allowed within the DO to be grown. I know one person using Garnacha, one using Malbec, and most everybody else, if they blend, which is only about 5 to 10% of producers, they blend with Cab Merlot, and usually no more than 10%. Everything we're showing tonight is 100% Tempranillo. Almost everything you'll find in the stores is 100%. It is the exception to find a blend. The range of taste and quality across that many winemakers using a single grape varietal, and within that a single clone within the Tempranillo grape, is incredible. And it really shows what a winemaker can do art-wise.
And it shows the terroir of the region.
Cheers.
Cheers. So some of these bottles will say Tinto Fino on the back. Some might say Tinto del País.
Del País. Those are names for the clone in this region. There are at least 14 different clones of Tempranillo in Spain. Some people say up to 18. There's another 4 or 5 in Portugal. Tempranillo is a party grape. It adapts itself to the soil that it's grown in. This is one of the harshest climates in all of Spain. We're 200 meters higher than Rioja, for instance. We're all continental. It's a very, very dark place. The clone Tinto Fino and Tinto del País will handle the weather. Baby Rioja plants brought to Ribera del Duero will not live through the winter
Just
here.
die?
They just die.
So these plants give, the clone gives small clusters, small berries, making powerful wines. Are the plants themselves a little more compact?
They have to be because of the wind.
I would
They tend to stay smaller. Even in most of the trellises are kept low as well because there's the harsh winds coming through. There's not a lot of forestation here to protect from the wind. And as you'll see when we get to the land pictures again, it's like a canyon. It's a big open canyon in many ways.
Go there. This is a map of the region, including and surrounding Ribera del Duero. And Ribera del Duero, basically, Aranda del Duero in the middle, and it stretches on this map, not to
as far
Soria.
as Valladolid or Soria. It's about, I would say, the center circle of that is pretty much, right in there. This is pretty much what holds it.
And this is a map of, this is really what the Ribera
right down in Aranda. And this wine, the Torre Milanos make the Maricastria Rosado. It comes from just below Aranda del Duero. In fact, when you're standing in their vineyards, you can see down into the town. Torre Milanos is an old winery. The family's been there for about 100 years. They make 10 different wines here, plus they make a few wines that are outside the DO.
10 different wines?
10 different wines at this winery.
In Ribera?
In Ribera. They have three different...
It's just an amazing... Besides single vineyard wines from Pinot makers in California, there's nobody who's making 10 different wines from a single vintage, the same grape.
They're a fairly large production. They do have some wines made from unallowed grapes. They're experimenting with things like Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay, which cannot be released as Riberas, but they're released as Vino de la Tierra, Castille Leon, which is the next step down, like the IGT system in Italy.
Sure.
But within Ribera, they're doing 10 different wines. This one is actually the first one they pick. It's picked 5 days before anything else is picked, and it comes from the lowest vineyards. They're about 20 years old, and to do the Rosado, and then they go back in a few days later to start picking the reds. So
the lowest vineyard. So this is an interesting...
When you say low, 2,700 feet above sea level is their lowest vineyard.
And we're talking, this is sort of a cross section. You can see the riverbed to the right of this image, and then it gives you an idea of where you can grow grapes and where you cannot grow grapes. This is in the east, and it goes up to about 850 meters here. Is this more east or west profile, would you think?
This is more east. But this wine is coming right in the middle where things start to change. But if you look, you have the valley floor. Most of that is turned over to cereal grapes now, and there's a few vineyards left. But almost all of that was uprooted and planted with beets and wheat and sugar and things. And then you've got, most of these are going to come from that first step, where the blue is, the Ladera. On the very top, you don't get very many vineyards up there because it's just too harsh and too much weather. If you're going to plant there, you have to plant windbreaks. You have to wait for those to mature high enough to protect your vines, and then you can plant vines.
So one of the most impactful elements that create the diversity is the change in soil types. Moving away from the riverbed is going to have more alluvial soil. You have these, basically, it looks like kind of cliff-like structures going up to a higher mesa.
Yeah.
A lot of limestone, a lot of chalky limestone. Do you have any idea what the soil's like where these grapes are grown?
It's almost all clay everywhere, clay and rock. This is an orange rock in this area. This looks like our American Southwest, except whiter because of the gypsum and the clay in the soil itself. So it's, I mean, we walked around in this. It's like you've stripped all the topsoil off. You're just walking in the clay, basically. to get to these soils. This is an interesting, Rosado is not something you hear a lot about with Ribera del Duero, but they make beautiful rosados. And I think Tempranillo makes a great rosado because it's nice and dry and bright and clean. It doesn't have that cloying candy cane
Fruity
thing
without
going
being
on.
sweet.
Fruity without being sweet,
Yeah.
exactly. It is the perfect summer cooler, and of course they make rosados. That's what they drink in the summer there.
I don't know if it's still true, but certainly 5 or 6 years ago, Spain was the #1 consumer of rosés in the world.
Yep.
Which
And,
surprised me a little bit because you tend not to think of them, and then it occurred to me, well, if they're drinking them all, of course
If
we're
they're
not
drinking them all,
thinking that.
exactly.
Yeah, they're all staying there. Why would we be thinking of them? It's a beautiful rosé. It's really it's got a little richness to it. It's not
Yeah.
terribly lean. It's not it's dry without being excessively
Yeah.
dry.
And of course, this is all stainless steel. I know of one Rosado that does use some oak. Prado Rey does one that is 50-50 Tempranillo Merlot, and they use some French oak on that. But almost all the Rosados will be stainless steel, just kept as bright and light as possible.
That's what
There
you
are
want.
more of them getting here. This one probably has the best
Distribution.
distribution.
And this is $15 average retail price for this bottle. I think it's a really attractive bottle, and this is a fantastic food wine, summertime wine. You could serve this basically with almost anything.
Exactly. Just about anything this will work with. This one, the alcohol is about 14%. Rosados can sometimes be lower, but you don't really feel
No, you don't,
what's going on with this.
because it's balanced.
It's a balanced wine. And it's natural yeast. It's a very simply made wine. It's not meant to be a hugely complex character to it. Just really, really good juice.
Refreshing and delicious, and yeah.
Easy to drink.
So what would be on the menu in Ribera del Duero? It's a little cool. It's not really summer yet here, but let's say in July or August.
Well, in July and August, as Edna Lewis, who was one of the great American chefs, said, what grows together goes together.
Absolutely.
You get lamb, you get beef, you get cereal crops, you get sugarcane, and of course salt cod, which is almost a staple there now because it's been one of the main foods for a long, long time. So that's what you're going to see a lot of, as well as chorizo and sausage and cured meats, cold meats.
That's what you want. That's what I want with this. When it's
Absolutely.
hot out, I'd boil up some potatoes, have some chorizo and some dried sausage, and this, I'd be thrilled.
And some really, really good bread. And that's
That's all it takes.
what supper is.
So, do you have any sense of how the Rosado market is growing for Ribera del Duero here in the States?
The Rosado market is growing slowly but surely because we are seeing more of them brought in. I can usually tell when I go to a presentation and we have our wineries there who's showing up with the Rosado to show. That means people have been asking for it because they're like, okay, well, this is worth the trouble of bringing this to put on display. I know that the Marios people, the Emilio Moro, their second winery, 721, had one of our last things. Lambuena makes a beautiful, beautiful Rosado. There were several at our Grand Annual, and the first year we didn't have any. So it's
When was the first year?
4 years ago.
So, is there any sort of mental roadblock? The region has been so focused on making high-end, complex, powerful red wines. Was there any sort of mental hurdle that they had to get past to start producing rosés? I mean, it's a little bit of a departure.
They've always produced rosés, but the image of Ribera del Duero was Pesquera and Emilio Moro and Vega Cecilia and the higher-end wines. When we started this, the U.S. was the 4th market for Ribera del Duero. We are now the #1 market.
Where was it? It was Spain,
Export market would have been Germany,
UK.
UK, possibly Japan. But we are now the #1. And it's because of our campaign, but it's because we've introduced all these wines at a lower price point, including the Rosados, to show that you can buy Ribera at, as low as $10. Between the $10 and $20 point, which is the sweet spot for a lot of people. We have a lot of those wines at that, which this falls into, and it's delicious. This one usually sells out. I never see past vintages of this on shelves here in the States because people love it so much. And when I sample it in stores, it's gone. Like, I will sell out 2 cases left, right, and center.
So I'm just looking at a question from Meg. It's hard to charge more than $15 for a rosé. And then she said, what's the most you'd spend? I don't know, but the most I would spend on a Euro rosé, but you certainly have Domainat pushing the envelope with, I don't remember what their standard wine is, but it's $45 for a rosé, and I think they've got a premium bottling that it's $60. I think the rosé market is opening up significantly.
I would agree with you. I think it's opening up a lot. You can get a lot of inexpensive rosé, but you're also kind of.
Do you want to drink a lot of it?
Do you want to drink a lot
That's
of it?
the
That's
bottom
the
line.
question. When I think of Rosado, I think of Lopez de Heredia, which is phenomenally expensive and just another level altogether.
It's a completely
different animal.
It's a completely different wine.
And I don't know anyone in Ribera making a Rosado on that level. I don't know anyone trying. Because
I don't know anybody else on the
even
planet
the world,
trying.
yes. Exactly.
That's it's aged for is it 10 years? I think
10
they
years,
released after
yeah.
10 years. So you've got a 10-year investment in rosé sitting in your cellar.
Yeah.
Very expensive proposition.
But I would rather spend $15 on a really good bottle of Rosado and enjoy it than spend $10 on something I don't really.
That you have to freeze to.
To enjoy. At which point, I might as well have lemonade.
No, it's got beautiful aromas. For me, it's raspberry and bright cherry fruit, and it has a sweetness on the nose of ripe fruit.
Mm-hmm.
But even now, this has been poured in the glass for a little while, and it wasn't freezing cold. And as it's warming up, it's maintaining its balance.
Yeah.
The alcohol's not coming out. That's sort of the sign. I always taste wine for review at room temperature because the faults have no place to hide.
When you're buying for a restaurant, one of the first lessons you learn is taste your white wines at room temperature because the cold will hide a lot of flaws. If it tastes good at room temperature, it'll taste good when it's cold.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this tastes good at room temperature.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful wine. Again, Finca Torre Milanos is located in Ribera del Duero. They have a magnificent hotel there. If you're doing old-fashioned style hotel, if you're doing travel, it's worth checking into.
Like a slight camera adjustment.
Am I hanging out the side?
You're drifting. You're
I'm
drifting.
used to a cameraman following me around.
Well, this is low budget, man. We have two backdrops though, so we
do.
saved the day there.
We do.
So let's we can move on to the next wine. So before we move on to we have 3 reds, we have 1 rosado. As a percentage of the production in Ribera, do you have a ballpark idea? 3%, 5%?
3 to 5% maybe.
So that's why we only have 1.
Yeah, and almost all of it stays in Spain. We are starting to get it, but they drink all of it. They love it, and
you can see why.
The French got in on the rosé market so early and really got it plowed. So now we're kind of having to fight our way in on it.
It's tough,
and I don't blame the French. I mean, good marketing for them.
Absolutely.
As in Provence rosés, beautiful.
They make beautiful wines, yeah. And they definitely have the advantage. I mean, one thing that I've stressed for years is you can't underestimate the value of tourism.
No.
I was in retail, and people would come back. And I was in this place, and I want the wine, and you would tell them it's not going to be as good as when you had it in this place on your honeymoon, but they insist. It builds the market. It builds familiarity.
Absolutely.
So we're moving on to the next wine. Ferretus AO.
AO.
Do you know what the AO stands for?
I don't. This is a very, very young winery and very, very forward-thinking. It's located only a few miles from the Torre Milanos, further on the north side of Ribera del Duero. And family-run operation. Cuevas Jimenez is the family name. The winemaker's name is Benigno Garuda, who is doing a phenomenal job. But the real talent here at Foratus is their daughter, Maria Luisa Cuevas Jimenez, who was a lawyer and has come back to help.
Easy for you to say.
Yeah, there we go. Come back to help her father and brother run the winery with a lot of new ideas, new concepts, thinking outside the box. This is going to have very low distribution in the States. They just got here within the last year. It literally just landed.
Yeah, this is new for me.
New for everybody.
Very nice package, well designed.
Beautifully packaged. They have a great website. If you Google Foratus, you should be able to find it. Beautiful pictures of the winery and some of the story that goes with it. Now this one, they're working very much handwork. Old vines, almost everything is goblet. I don't think they have any trellis vines at all.
So goblet
like this, bush vines.
Bush vines, no wires, no lines, no rows.
Which until the
Plants.
18th century was what everyone was doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was considered this, I guess it was the first guys in Rioja that brought in the trellis, and they had stepped over the line and just ruined winemaking forever by introducing trellises.
Every generation has their
thing. I know in La Mancha, up until 10 years ago, you couldn't blend anything. It had to be single varietals, or you were ostracized from society. You were bad. So they're working with old vines. They have a lot of plots that they own or operate around within Burgos, even around La Hora and some of the great villages. La Hora is where Pingas sources, Alto source all their fruit from there, and including their clippings. It's one of the greatest wine villages, and it's tiny. It's like 50 people, if that many, in the middle of nowhere in Duero, but several other villages. They do hand selection twice, in the vineyard and again on the sorting table when they bring it in. Malolactic is done in barrel. I don't know, the sheet I got on it says it's 2012, which says there's a little American oak use in it. The website and the bottle all say 100% French.
I don't get any American oak on the nose. I get you get French oak
I would
immediately.
say it's used oak at that. Most winemakers, they will use different levels of oak. Of course, oak, first year you've got a lot of flavor, then less for the next 3 years until it's used. A lot of winemakers will only use second and third year because they don't want that impact of brand new oak impacting the wine and hitting it hard. They're doing phenomenal work here. Her wines are very, very vintage specific.
This is a fascinating wine.
Yeah.
I have never tried this wine before, and in all honesty, from the nose, from the packaging, I was expecting something a little slicker, for lack of a better term, and it has just a tremendous amount of character, a little bit glossy and and matte in the mouth. And
this is.
I mean, I was expecting soft, voluptuous tannins, and I was expecting
overripe.
More, yes,
yeah,
or that,
yeah,
or that.
So she's keeping the acid level really, really good. Acid is the one thing a lot of American wines, and I'm not bashing American wines, but they tend to over-ripen, and you lose the acidity in favor of all this big, fleshy fruit.
I think it's an international phenomenon at this point.
It's international style, yeah. And she's not. She's going the other direction. They make better food wines with this acid level and this, because the fruit is there. And this is perfect temperature, by the way. You've got a really great temperature on it, so the alcohol's not too high.
Just to let you know, the red wines sit in front of the air conditioner. That's my trick.
Yeah.
Air conditioner's on 66, and I put the wines in front of them.
And that's all you have to do, that or stick them in the refrigerator for about 8 to 10 minutes just to knock that cool off, because otherwise the alcohol is going to be too high. I did a big tasting for Benny's in Chicago on Saturday. We iced everything because we were outdoors, and that kept them at the perfect temperature for tasting outdoors in the heat, keeping them nice and cool, and keeping the alcohol from being too high. AO stands for acero. Somebody's been here.
I don't know what acero means.
Acero. It's a Spanish word, which my Spanish is terrible.
Somebody, we're getting a live feed for steel.
Iron steel. Ferratus originally meant in Spanish iron steel. So that was is where that word comes from. Of course, now they're talking about F for fabulous and F for festive and a lot of other things to make that F go with. It's an incredible wine. It's a great idea. This one's coming as a Roble, meaning it's had about 6 months of oak aging.
Is that written anywhere?
It's not. They're leaving themselves open. It says Cosecha, which is the general label. They're not claiming Roble, because once you claim to be a Roble or a Crianza or a Reserva, you're stuck.
And
exactly.
Just the difference basically is Roble means oak. If you are a Joven or a Cosecha, you can do wood,
pretty much whatever you want.
Not wood.
For example, a Crianza is a minimum of 2 years aging, 1 year in barrel. You cannot fudge down. You can fudge up. You could do 23 months in barrel, 1 month in bottle. You could not do 11. So if you're tasting that wine and it's ready at 11 months, but you have a Crianza label that you have spoken about, you are stuck to leave it in that extra month.
Does that mean anything to you?
Lechazo, that means nothing to me whatsoever.
I don't know what Lechazo is.
Yes.
So somebody's confusing us. But anyway, back to the wine. I find this to be a very impressive wine. It's got a tremendous amount of structure hidden in there. I mean, I'm a tannin freak. I love tannins, but I like this kind of. They're not coarse, but they're angular. Mm-hmm. They're food tannins. They'll fit together with something else.
There's phenomenal elegance to this wine, and despite the French oak, I would not necessarily call it a feminine wine.
Oh no.
It's got some body and some oomph and some hit to it, but it's not
shot putter maybe.
An Eastern shot putter. I don't know if I go that far.
Maybe not that far.
A female shot putter. I'm not sure I go to the male shot putter.
We would go to the East German. I was talking about the women from the East German team.
It's got a lot of structure and a lot of strength. It's going to hold up to a lot of foods. Great for summer. This could be chilled down as well. This could go down to 60 degrees without any problem whatsoever.
Great for barbecues.
Price on
this is stupid sauces on it.
Stupid sauces, exactly. Between $19 and $22 on this. There are Robles that will go as low as $10. And you can find them across the board. And when you see that word Roble, that just means oak. It's an aging term.
They also use Barrica.
Barrica, right? 6 meses in Barrica, you'll see that a lot, meaning 6 months in oak. Is basically what that comes across.
So you can spend less, but you're not going to get a wine of this character.
No, this character and quality. You'll be hard-pressed to find a Roble of this character and quality. The Robles they're meant to be drunk young. They're meant to be drunk bright and pretty. Liazo is lamb. Well, of course, you should have told me lamb.
Lamb.
Lamb is, like I said, lamb is one of the main products there, and lamb and Tempranillo.
Do they have goat there?
They have goat.
I would,
Not as much goat, but some goat.
I would love goat with this. Goat's a little fattier, a little gamier.
Goat. You know how much trouble goats are to grow?
I
As they say, if water will go there, so will a goat. The fences you need for goats are just
that part. Yeah,
they'll kill you.
It's easy to grow them. It's hard to catch them.
It's hard to catch them, and they will eat everything. Especially what we tried goats on the farm. They will eat everything that you don't want them to eat first.
If you had goats, this would be the vineyard in the summertime.
That would be the vineyard. Yeah, they would take everything off. I love this wine.
I'm very impressed with this wine. This is, and also it's a wine that hits me on many levels because it's also fun to drink. It's not cloying. It's not heavy, and it's even with this 5 minutes we've had in the glass. It's developing. It's showing different facets. And then on the flip side, for $22, it's a fairly serious.
It's a serious wine.
You give this to a wine geek, and they can geek out on it. You give it to my brother. He would enjoy this as well, which is a beautiful thing. Which I think, for various reasons, I think Ribera del Duero has a little bit of a reputation of not being able to have this kind of elegance, of being more about power.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's the story that they were telling.
That's not the story they were telling. That was the example of the wines that hit big and hit early, that made the name.
So those are the wines that were recognized by critics as.
Exactly. They were the first ones out of the gate. And I appreciate that style. And some of them are incredibly beautiful wines. But Ribera can be so much more than just that one style. And in a way, it kind of did a disservice to the region to think this is all they do. It's like thinking all California can do are those big, flabby Cabernets. There's a lot of beautiful wine in California that didn't get put up there as this is the California style.
Sure, absolutely.
And so Ribera kind of, not as bad as California did, but kind of hit there, and that's what we've done is try to bring in those other styles, and highlight how good those the first styles are because they're beautiful, but they fit into a pattern.
Yeah, you need
show
you
breadth
need
of
some
style.
gateway
Yeah,
wines. I mean, I think that's
exactly.
The Rosados are a fantastic addition to the portfolio because they not only give people the message that it's not just big dark red wines.
Exactly.
A variety of wines. But they also let people taste at $15 and get an idea of what Tempranillo does in the region.
This is a great wine to sit and swirl because it starts out, it's got a lot of in your face and that high acid. You swirl it down, you can get to the exact level you want. Because once you swirl it, once you decant or swirl something down, you can't put that life back in. No. This one starts at a nice high point. You can bring it down to what works. I can see this with like a pasta with cream sauce. I can see it with chicken.
I was actually just strange that you mentioned that because for me it's getting a little bit of a creamy texture in the mouth. Yeah,
it's so elegant and so smooth. Part of that is the malolactic in barrel that they're holding on to before they bottle it, just to because that's the whole idea of that malolactic is to bring that roundness out and soften it. Plus the old vines, the character is just.
Do we have an idea of how old the vines are?
Yeah, somewhere I have this in there. 20 to 30 years in goblet as well. The goblet adds extra tension to the vine and stresses it out even further because they're having to hold up against all the weather influences. And you'll drive through Ribera and you'll see a goblet vineyard and suddenly you'll see an empty spot or a little tiny shoot, meaning that plant finally just gave up.
Kick
and they
the
had to
bucket
replace it.
after 100 years or so?
Yeah. And he goes, there are a few goblet vines in California. I think Buckland has some. And
the Old Hill Vineyard.
Oh my God, that's a great wine.
That's a crazy vineyard too. That's a crazy vineyard. It looks a little like that, but we'll talk about that in a different session.
Different session.
So this Ferratus, $22. It's pricey if you compare it against other Cosecha wines, but that's not what this is. This is really
it's very big around Chicago too. You can get it in Chicago, Wisconsin, Indiana. I know it's here in New York. Massachusetts has it. And it's spread quickly because it literally came into one state at the start, and it's being picked up that quickly.
I wonder what this tasted like before Mallow. I mean, this is.
I say the acid was really high.
I can only imagine. I mean, the acid is still.
The acid's still there.
Still high.
Yeah, it is a food wine. Definitely a food wine. But
so is that
what a way to go?
What is this? 14%.
14.
It says 14 on the back label. It could be plus or minus.
Whoops, wrong cheat sheet.
It's an amazing thing to have this kind of acidity. If it's natural.
My cheat sheet's saying 14.
14.
Yeah.
Well
of course,
done.
this is a 2011, which was a beautiful vintage as well.
So we can talk a little bit about that. I heard 2010 is an exceptional vintage.
Well, 9 was considered perfect, but 9 is a big, vibrant vintage. 4 was also perfect. 10 was considered perfect, but it's soft. So you're getting much more feminine styles coming out of that.
Which is interesting because that's the wine media talking. That 10 is great because it's easy and approachable.
Easy and approachable. Easy and approachable. The 9s are going to need a little more time to settle in. They're so delicious now, and you can see the potential that people are drinking them too early. But
as long as they're drinking them, it's never too early, right?
Yeah. And then 11 is looking really, really good. 12, I haven't heard so much about. The Rosado was spectacular.
It was very good. We can move on. We're going to move on to...
One of the things about vintages, they talk about great vintages and off vintages. In the old days, that meant more than it does now.
Absolutely.
Modern winemaking has removed an awful lot of the obstacles that a poor vintage would put in place because you're able to, especially because of stainless steel, you can avoid a lot of the pitfalls. So it's more important now, I think, to know a great winemaker and to follow their work. A great winemaker and a great vintage is wonderful, but a great winemaker will make great wine in off vintages as well. So you can't just... I mean, great vintage, all that means is the conditions were right for everybody to make good wine.
The fruit got right.
So you can still get a bad wine in a great vintage because you picked the wrong winemaker. So
it's actually, I find, to a certain extent, off vintages, for whatever that means. I mean, it's a very broad category. Some are really terrible.
Yeah.
But most vintages that the media says they're not great, they're good, they're not great. For me, they can be. They don't tend to, but they can be much more interesting, especially in the youth, because it's not all about big fruit.
And also, the winemaker had to work that much harder. And when you put that much more work into it, chances are you're going to...
Make a little gem.
Make a little gem, yeah. The 2007, which was kind of an off vintage for Ribera del Duero, the Emilio Moro 2007 was spectacular. Just one of the best wines. The Foratus 2007, which was, I mean, talk about high acid, but just one of the most gorgeous, light reds, almost like a very, very light Pinot Noir I'd ever had. So it's all about the winemaker. And so you've got to learn those and not just buy by vintage.
So it's very interesting because there is vintage variation. Has there been any significant climate change that you've heard of the past decade?
Ribera hasn't noticed as much. We're hearing about it in La Mancha in particular, and Portugal is really feeling it. And as you can almost watch the brown line moving further and further north. A few years ago, there was a memo leaked from Torres. They were telling their people, look for land further north. They're making good wines in England now.
They are making
unheard of 50 years ago. Unheard of. Where I live in Missouri, when I was growing up, we could never grow magnolia trees. Now we can. And that's all you kind of need to know, that it is getting warmer on the surface of the earth. When they did the last big environmental thing in Barcelona, that the Al Gore, whatever that is, they brought the wine people in because they noticed it first in the vines. And so they were talking to them heavily about what's going on with global warming. Ribera, haven't noticed that much of it yet. Although obviously it's affecting a little bit with rain and stuff like that, but not enough to...
Maybe the seasons move a little bit. I know that in Italy there's
tiny
seasonal shift.
At least feeling it, yeah.
So here we've moved on to the...
Matar
Romera. What is that? That means Kiln Romera? Matar Romera?
Matar Romera is celebrating their 25th year. This is their 25th year in business. They are really, really excited. It's a phenomenal winery located way, way, way over on the west edge of Valladolid, almost outside the Dio, right on the edge of it, which is where their vineyards are. The Matar Romera line, they also have a winery called Emina, which is big and modern and similar, closer in packaging style to the Foratus. The Matar Romera is much more classical in style and old school, although they are a very green winery, really, really heavy into solar and wind and reusing everything, low carbon footprint. They have, the Emina winery has the first charging station for electric cars in Ribera del Duero.
Oh, wow.
There are only 363 of those in all of Spain.
Are there any electric cars there?
There are. They're slowly getting there. There's 363 charging stations, and they have the first one in Ribera at the Emina winery.
So here we're farther to the west. We have some images from the winery. It looks very much like what we have behind us.
Moonscape. Moonscape with vines.
A lot of clay. You can see part of it's dry, gets whiter. Part of it's retaining water, and this is what the vines look like
when they start to grow up.
Yeah. I mean, this is an old vine. It certainly looks like a stunted little vine.
And that vine's going to stand no more than maybe 2.5 feet tall. Are there specific parts of Ribera del Duero that are known for creating superior wines? Eric Guido asked this question. Well, La Hora, as I said, this is the village that Pingus is pulling his starts from, Alto, which is right in the middle of Burgos. Vega Cecilia is only a few miles from the wine that we're drinking right now. Of course, their wines are considered some of the best in the world.
I mean, this is no marketing speak.
No marketing speak.
Absolutely top 100 wines of the world, if not higher.
Every year. Pesquera, the Alejandro Fernandez wines, another phenomenal winery. Those are located a few miles away from where this one is located. At the far end in Soria, you have Domenio do Atauta, which has some pre-Phloxera vines, up to 200 years old, making spectacular wine out of those vines. So every part of Ribera it's possible within Ribera. Again, it's the winemaker. You really have to look to your winemaker to make these spectacular wines. I think the most perfect example of a winemaker working within a less known region is Marques de Grignon in Valdepusa in Toledo. They had to create an entire separate category of wines for him because his wines were so outstanding in a region that nobody else could do anything in. That is changing, of course, but that's the power of a great winemaker. And Ribera has a lot of those areas. Thank you for the question, Eric.
In Ribera, I know that in lots of the emerging regions of Spain, people have been able to make great wines because they've gone out and they've found old vineyards that were really family vineyards, so they're not, they're a hectare, 2 hectares, and they piece together these properties to create the source of fruit that they need for their various wines. I think the Malleolus is
very much on that. Yeah.
Is that a common thread? Are there big estates in Ribera, or are there lots of small land holdings?
There's both.
There's both.
The Ferratus is one of those where they're picking little pieces here, there, and everywhere. Tormilanos is a big estate, all self-contained. Mataremera has 2 or 3 big vineyard areas located to the north of. I always say that town wrong. I'm not even sure. It's where Pingus is located. Quintesilla de Aniesmo. I always get that name wrong. It's right over on the edge. And what they're doing there, they have 2 big plots of old vines, about 20 to 40 years old, meaning that's when they were planted. Mostly bush. They have some trellis vines as well. This is all American oak. They do use some French oak on the others. This one is all American. It's a full, I think, 14 months. 12 or 14 months is doing
14
it. 14, yeah, and then another 10 in bottle. Mataremera was one of the wines that King Juan Carlos chose for his son Felipe's wedding dinner.
That's an honor.
Yes, exactly.
Doesn't happen often.
Ribera Protos used to be served at Mass in St. Peter's.
Did it really?
Which is another Ribera winery, yeah. So we have a lot of history going out in all different directions. The one thing we're missing is a Borja. The Borgias were from Campo de Borja, so we sort of missed them. That's another part of Spain. But there's been winemaking here for 2,000 years. At least. We have hard definitive proof of winemaking when the Romans were there. And of course, the Camino de Santiago, which went right along the river, which was the famous pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela, meant that there were wineries and
rest stops
and convents and monasteries all along there. And the monks, that was when winemaking really took off. There was actually more land under vine in the Middle Ages than there is now.
That's amazing.
So it's been quite a
so
story.
that triggers a question for me, because all those vineyards in the Middle Ages were obviously farmed organically.
Mm-hmm.
I think roughly Ribera gets something along the line of 18 inches, 19 inches of rain a year.
Yeah.
Lots of wind, lots of sun. So the climate's very conducive to farming organically.
Farming organically. The issue with that is you have a lot of cereal crops and you have a lot of cattle. And no matter how hard you try to be organic, if the guy next to you isn't, and that wind blows it over, you'll test positive for stuff. Almost every winemaker knows practicing organic now.
Just for you and for everybody else, I think that the entire world of actual fine winemaking has realized that becoming certified organic, for the most part, doesn't mean much.
No.
It's all about what you actually do. There are a lot of different certifying agencies. Regulations are different country to country, sometimes region, province to province. So certified organic is becoming a little bit of...
And you also have to be realistic about pesticides and things. It's like humans. We get injections to protect us against diseases. Cattle are animals. They need certain injections. The problem comes when you force feed them antibiotics and things to stimulate the growth.
Absolutely.
If that animal is being raised naturally on forage and regular food, you're not getting that. The same thing with vines. If you're using just enough of protective substance to keep the vine alive, keep the pests away, you shouldn't have a problem with it. It's when you start adding unnecessary chemicals and things.
Doing systemic treatments just because you're on a schedule and.
Well, they found that with these seeds now that they've developed that would repel pests. They're also repelling the bees.
Yeah,
the bees, which
insane.
breed the things.
It's insane.
So
What is going on? So that'll bring us to two questions.
Someone wants us to be serious about the wine.
My goodness.
Food pairings and how much time to give this wine to open up. When did you open this?
I opened this at 6-ish.
At 6. This is a 2008. 2008 was a really, really, really hot summer, so you get big, jammy fruit because those grapes got really, really ripe. I want to mention right quick, irrigation is allowed here. No one can afford it. You have to buy your water, and the equipment is phenomenally expensive. If they do, and plus there's the whole thing about people don't want to use irrigation because it's just bad form. They will use it in the spring to start the groundwater, say March, April, if they've had a dry winter. That's the only time I really hear about being used. Anyway, big, big jammy fruit. So yes, this does have a lot of fruit to it, a lot of alcohol, a lot of character coming through on it. How long to let it open up? Well, a lot of that is personal taste.
I agree.
At what point do you think it's opened? For me, I don't like to decant. I like to start with it fresh out of the bottle, and if I'm unhappy with it, as you can see, I'll swirl it down to the point that I really like it. But that's me kind of geeking out on the wine. I know not everybody wants to do that. They want to pour it from the bottle at the right temperature, the right place.
They want it to be. They want us to tell them exactly when to drink it.
And the thing is, because we're not you, we can't tell you exactly when you're going to like it because only you know when you're going to like it exactly. I would guess 30 minutes. If you're going to decant it, I would not wait more than 10 minutes to start serving.
What about putting it in the cellar for a couple of years?
Oh, absolutely.
What is this going to do in the cellar?
I would not put this in the cellar for more than 7 or 8 years. I think because of the vintage.
Because of the vintage, yes.
Because of the vintage, I think the 2009 in this is going to have a 20, 25-year life range. I think the 09s, the structure is so perfect across the board in the 09s that it will go forever. The 08s, I would give 10 years, although I think this is tasting.
It's pretty tasty. I mean, for me, definitely could see this 2 or 3 years in the cellar.
Yeah.
Enter it a little bit more, round out another hour or two. It shows some warm vintage character to it.
You get the warm vintage. This one could definitely do with being with chilled down just a little bit. As would all 08s, not just but most of the 8s I've tasted can use that.
And somebody asked about food pairing. Again, for me, this is a red meat.
Oh yeah,
wine.
But a grill in the summer, a grilled steak in the summer with this, chill this down to about 60 degrees, just cut the edge off the alcohol.
Tighten it up a little bit.
This would be the perfect summer barbecue. Not barbecue with sauce, but barbecue over the open grill.
Yes, we don't do barbecue. I don't. For future reference, everybody, barbecue is a sauce on the side activity.
Sauce on the side, exactly.
And I'm only doing that because I'm a very generous host and I care about you, but I don't put sauce on my barbecue generally. It's a very nice wine. It certainly has aged character as well.
Yeah.
Is this a reserve or this is Crianza?
This is a Crianza.
So this is, but still, 14 months in oak, 10 months in the bottle.
They do make a reserve, which is really beautiful. It's but a continuation of the same idea of what the Crianza is. Gorgeous, gorgeous wines, and the attention to detail at Madeira. They're not huge. They make all the attention that goes into it. They make quality wines, and they do what they do. They do really, really well. That's what I'm trying to say.
Which is sort of an overarching theme here.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody, we have only 4 producers here, but everybody making wine there's not a lot of money to make cheap wine.
No.
You can't really make a profit making cheap wine in Ribera, I would imagine.
No.
And it's a pain in the ass to farm vines like this 2 feet off the ground.
Mary Kressler, great quote.
You just earned no sauce allowed. Yeah, Mary Kressler. Greg, you just earned I earned 1,000 points in our hubby's book. No sauce allowed. I don't know what our hubby's book is, but hopefully it's a barbecue book about wine geeks.
See, growing up on the farm, you learn to appreciate the organic, the stuff right out of the field. Like my eggs in the morning, I stole from the chicken 5 minutes before.
And those yolks
still warm.
Stand up and they're bright yellow with orange.
And the same with the beef. You want it as clean and clear. Maybe a little pepper, a little bit of sauce.
Yeah.
Yep. Salt, no sauce, but a little bit of salt. It's just sauces are great in French cooking, where the French really understand what they're doing.
And maybe with French wine. I'm not a
French
big.
wine,
I'm not a sauce guy. I'm a raw ingredient
Yeah.
guy. I think that the beauty of great wines for me is just capturing
Yep.
that moment, the vintage, the vineyard, the variety, the winemaker, and showing it all to me in a very clear way. And that's the same way. That's what I dig on food.
Yeah.
Napa Girl. I think the Ferratos needed a bit of cellaring. Is that correct? Yeah, I think for most people it's a little aggressive.
It's a little aggressive. I would agree with you. It's going to taste a little aggressive. Are you having it with food or are you having it by itself? Because it's going to change a little bit of meat or cheese with this. You're going to get a different flavor to it. Also, just swirl it down a little bit.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, for me, I like that sort of nervous quality in wine. I love high acid. I love those angular tannins, so I would be thrilled to drink it today. I would imagine, though, even for me, next year after 12 months in the bottle, I would imagine that's when it would really be absolutely perfect in singing. And then maybe another 2 or 3 years, or another year or two to make it 2 or 3 years. I think for most people that would be perfect. And that's, I'm sure you can lay that down for 5 years, no problem. And for
this one you can. Most Robles you don't want to lay down for more than 5 years. This one you could go up to 10 years on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of wine in there. A lot of well-made, tense wine in there.
It's going to hold. Again, we're talking personal preference. You think it needs a little bit of cellaring? Absolutely. Go for it. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong because it's your palate and what you appreciate about it. I like it exactly as it is. Greg would go with giving it a little more time as well.
Well, it depends. If I had a nice, that's a nice gamey cut of grass-fed beef, sirloin steak, not a fancy cut, requires some chewing, and that would be absolutely perfect. And I would drink that tonight. On the grill, not too charred.
Absolutely. So, Madeira, the Crianza is available around the country. It's not available everywhere. If you go to their website, Madeira,
fancy bottle.
Madeira, GRUPOMAT.
Fancy bottle.
I can never remember how to spell Madeira. Anyway, groupamadeiramera.com. You can find out where it's available. They do have a map that shows all their
do they really?
locations.
Very,
they do. They're really good about that.
Very forward thinking.
They're well organized, and they do have representation here in the States that you can contact, and they will get back to you almost immediately.
So
they're really good about that.
And these vineyards are on the west side, right?
Far west side.
So we're
They're
talking
the most western of all the vineyards we're showing tonight.
So the slope of the topography changes and it grows steeper on the west side, and you really don't see this anyplace else but here. This is supplied by Drink Ribera.
Now, if you look down here, the yellow part, Vega Cecilia sits in that yellow part.
Their vineyards are there?
Their vineyards are there right down here because the estate has been there for so long, so it never got pulled up because they've been making wine all along.
So from 1880s,
1864 when it was
1864
when it was first founded.
Wow!
So that's where their vineyards are located. You also have a couple others, Villa Cresces, which is they literally share. There's a Roman aqueduct. The ruins is the wall between them and Vega Cecilia. You have Monte Castro is in that area. Pescara is across the river, similar topography. Emilio Moro is across the river, which is what we're going to the next wine. Similar idea. Pescara does have some wines on the very top up there in the flat, but he did plant trees up there
as a windbreak.
As a windbreak. There are very few slopes that are used, steep slopes, except for Condado de Haza, which is another Pescara winery.
And why is that?
He did that purposely to have the clay, the gypsum, and the sand, all three soil types, and then to blend the grapes from the three different soil types.
So he's making paint.
Different
colors to work with.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on.
Idea. Malleolus. Emilio Moro is one of the older wineries in the area, and it's 3 generations that have been making wine here. Emilio, his son Emilio, and now Jose.
Is the winery founded in 1972? It's got this 1972.
Yes, but they've been growing grapes. Oh, that's when the picture was taken.
Oh.
They've just rebranded their bottles. They changed the labels. And at first I wasn't sure why they did it, because I like the old labels aesthetically better. And then I started reading about the history of these. All their bottles now have this clean, crisp label and a picture. That picture is actually family members or something pertinent to the family and the winemakers. They're not just pretty pictures. And there's a little bit of history on the back label of it. And so there's a great deal of story going into it, and I think they're brilliant. I think it's a great marketing plan. Malleolus, which is a derivative of the word maduelos, which means small vineyard. And they've been working across the 3 generations to save small plots, develop these wines, Each one is kind of some microclimate and then blending through. Would be their Reserva if they called it a Reserva.
But they don't. They call it a cosecha.
They call it cosecha. Again, they're doing 18 months in Allier oak, but they don't want to have to go the whole 18 months then in bottle if they don't feel like it, and they also want to leave themselves open to going less oak time.
Doing what they have to do, vintage to vintage.
Vintage to vintage.
So this is a very expensive cosecha.
Yes.
This is $50.
This is $50. If you think of Super Tuscans in Italy, this is the same kind of idea where you're not fitting the rules per se, but you're making spectacular wine. This is an '09. You can smell that vintage. It is so bright and beautiful. And I can almost tell you now I'm going to think this needs another 3 or 4 years.
Mm. It is very young. It is impeccably balanced. The Ferratus, I think, could use some time because it's very well balanced, but it's a little aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
This is incredibly well integrated, smooth. Also, a lot of high acid wine. This is a little surprising. This in your mind when you think of things like you said, it's like a Super Tuscan. I tend to think of wines that are a little more massaged than this one is.
Yeah. This, I think, in 3 to 4 years is going to be so spectacular. The problem will be it will probably be sold out, and you won't be able to find it.
It'll be drunk too.
It'll be drunk too.
It's pretty easy to drink right now
because it's just it's tasting beautifully now.
It is.
You can taste every bit of quality in this. It's suggested retail on this is between $50 and $60. It tastes every bit of that money.
It does.
You are not going to be disappointed. That's how I used to buy in the restaurant. If I taste it and I'd look at what price I was going to have to put on it, if it tastes like the money, then I'd go for it.
Absolutely.
Then I go for it, yeah.
And this is a kind of deceptive wine though, because you can drink it now, you'll enjoy it now, but it's got so much more in reserve, and it will in 2 or 3 years, 5 years. Turn into a different wine. It will turn into a much more complex, detailed wine. But it is very well made.
It's just beautifully made, and the entry level Medio Moro, not the Finca Rosalso, but the next one up is just spectacular. The '09. I'm yet to taste an '09 I didn't like and didn't think was just really, really wonderful. This one, as I say, this is located at Pescara del Duero, which is a little further east of where we were with Madeira, right along the river. Beautiful, beautiful wineries. A family-run operation, although it's fairly big, and they are very modern thinking, very forward thinking in how they approach their winemaking. They do a lot with social responsibility and giving back to the community in various ways, and they're good people.
Actually, making the wine. I mean, this is sort of an interesting wine because it's in a way it's modern, and maybe this is just Tempranillo and Ribera del Duero talking. But in a way, I tend to get the feeling that you really can't. It's very difficult to tame Tempranillo, to strip the Tempranillo-ness and the Ribera del Duero-ness of the grape and the region.
I would agree with you on that. I think because of the limitations of the grape you're using, and you always get a clean focus. You can recognize a Ribera, and part of that is the limitations of not just the DO rules, but the region itself, the climate, what it does to it. You are always going to get that Ribera character, that Ribera idea, that identity that comes through loud and clear. Wow. And this one is just singing Ribera.
Very powerful wine, too.
Yeah. Singing Ribera straight across. And the alcohol in this is not that high from what you would think it might be.
What do we got here?
I'm going to say 14.5
on the label.
14.5 on the label, yeah.
So the climate is ideal for this strain of Tempranillo that has grown up there.
But not just for the strain, but for Tempranillo in general, because it's so arid. With 17 inches of rain, it's very dry. Tempranillo likes cool, it likes dry. It can handle heat, but it likes cool and dry, and that's exactly what this is.
So, but what about the blending grapes that nobody seems to use? It does not seem to be ideal for Cabernet, Merlot, Malbec, probably Grenache, maybe.
Those you grow, but generally they're grown in microclimate areas. They're grown in secluded south-facing slopes, little hills where they're away from the wind, which is part of why nobody uses them that much because they are harder to grow.
Pain in the ass to grow.
They're a pain in the ass. And the people trying to grow white grapes there, the canopy management alone would wear you out. Just trying to protect, because the sun is so intense so quickly that white grapes tend to burn. And that's why there's no white wines here, really. So it's a lot of...
Have you tried a white wine? Does anybody make a white wine?
Well, there's a few that the Torminados make. I haven't tasted them. So I don't know. Vegas Athelia tried to make an Albio, scrapped the project because they were unhappy with it, didn't feel it lived up to their standards. Most people are so busy making great red wine that they're not
They'll buy
not putting the
their
effort
bottles
into
of
it.
white wine they
Yeah.
need.
Plus, you have Rueda, which is fairly close, and there's several Protos owns a property there. Several of the wineries have properties in Rueda and around the area. And of course, Vega is opening a Rioja winery that's being released this year. So
There's a lot of that going on in Spain. There's a lot of cross-regional businesses.
A lot of flying winemakers. Peter Sizik, who of course makes Pingus and Sai and works with Hacienda Monasterio, he's what they call a flying winemaker and has properties all over the country that he works with. Madalena, Telmo Rodriguez, another winemaker who has a property in Ribera del Duero. He flies around doing stuff. Aufernier, which has their big property, their winemaker that spends half the year in Ribera and half in South America. So he's got stuff going on all over the place.
Which is very easy because your
seasons
are not overlapping. They're
just
complementary.
All year round. Never has that break time. So it's a fascinating place. And everything from small guys like Convento San Francisco with four young guys working to make their wine everywhere to, Aufernier, which is a quite large corporation, to Vegas Athelia, which is like trying to get into Fort Knox. It's so well protected.
You can't get in there?
Can't get in there. So well protected around that. And then Pingus, which is kind of secretive and stuff going on. So it's pretty wild.
Kiersey wants me to take questions. I don't know if anybody has questions, but Kiersey's the one who's going to... I don't have any questions on my screen, Kiersey. Help me out. I'm trying to connect.
There we go.
Google Docs failure. This is what happens when you rely on technology.
Well, while you're doing that, I'm going to reach across.
You can go back to that.
And go back to the Fratus.
Is this working? Oh, Google Docs. Google Docs have failed me. So, Kiersey, you have to write out the questions on pieces of paper and come and either give them to me or show them to me.
Flash them in the window, Christy. There we go.
This is most peculiar. Most peculiar. Sending requests. So, lots going on there. What are the next developments that we should expect to hear about out of Ribera del Duero?
You're going to see more things like what Fratus is doing with Maria Luisa and outside influence coming in to work with traditional winemaking. Emilio Moro is doing that already. Pesquera Alejandro has turned all that over to his daughters, who are now the winemakers there. You have a lot of young winemakers coming in. Emilio Moro owns a property called Cepa 21, which is an entirely different style from what Emilio Moro does. You're going to find that.
Which is another fabulous wine.
Incredible wine. The guy who originally did Domaine du Atauta now has a property called Anedotto, where he's making his own style. He's from Bordeaux and making young olive French oak on the far eastern side. Then you have guys like Patrick Mata, who runs Olay, one of the importers, who is sourcing out vineyards and having wine made in various places, putting labels on. Jorge Ordonez has a new one, the Avanti Cenetta, that is really, really nice. He's having made at Vigna Villano, which is another established winery, but he's putting his stamp on it. So you're seeing a lot more individuality, and you're going to see a lot more of people going back to the original style, but with new equipment so they can perfect it.
Cleaning.
Cleanliness.
It's the hygiene revolution that's taken place basically around the world for the past 20 years. And
exactly.
It is producing wines like this. I am very sorry that I am not getting the questions from you guys.
Oh, here we
have
go.
a list of questions coming in, but
right.
My Google Drive failed. And that's
how do you know it's Reserva? I don't see it on the bottle anymore. As we were talking about, it says it's...
It'll say on the back label.
It says Cosecha because of the aging time. When you talk about and also where it fits into the lineup of the wines. They only do 5 principal wines here. Finca Rosalso, which is their Roble, 3 to 4 months. The Emilio Moro, which is essentially a Crianza. The Malleolos, the Reserva, and then they have 2 single vineyards on top, the Val de Almeida and the Sancho Martin. All of them are listed as Cosecha because they've chosen to give themselves the leeway on the aging characteristics. It is purely because I know what that amount of time in barrel and bottle means that I can call it their Reserva equivalent, but it is not a Reserva exact. Reserva means a full year in barrel and 2 years in bottle minimum, 3 years aging total. So that's...
They don't want to do that.
And they don't want to do that.
They want to get you a fresher wine.
Yeah.
That sort of goes hand in hand with the hygiene revolution.
Exactly.
You know, these are, for whatever reason, these are the regulations, and there's some producers who say, hey, you know what, after 30 months the wine tastes better than after whatever. So they want to get it out into your hands when they think it's best. They don't want to be bound to regulations. So Dizel, is there such a thing as a textbook Ribera del Duero? I think I know the answer to that question.
It's depends on what style Ribera you're looking at.
That's
If you're looking
no.
at the modern textbook Ribera, go with Pescara. If you're looking for the old style of textbook Ribera, Viña Mayor does one. The Sai, actually, which is even a little lighter perhaps, is closer to that old original deep style. The '07s, because they were a lighter style, that's closer to what you would call the old world. But Vega Cecilia probably stands as the textbook Ribera. Vega Cecilia, the Unico, which is mother's milk, is approximately 80% Tempranillo,
It's a
20%
blend, yeah.
Cabernet. It's fermented in 70,000 liter French foudres and then goes into American oak barrels of different sizes, a little bit of French. Their oak comes from Ohio, by the way, as does Pescara's. You get oak from Missouri and Pennsylvania as well being used in Ribera del Duero, as well as just generic American oak.
Ohio.
So textbook Ribera, not really.
Ohio's, that's for me, from what I hear from people, because obviously I don't make wine, that's one of the top places, if not the top source for American oak.
For American oak, deep, deep, deep topsoil, which means you get a longer fibers, less gnarls and less knots, which is what they want for winemaking.
And
American oak tends to be very hard anyway, and I know Missouri oak, it's all knots and holes, which means you have to cut it and you get just a different...
and cold winters.
What kind of glass should one use for this wine? One without a hole in the bottom, hopefully.
That'll be good. No holes in the side either.
What kind of glass?
I'm back. We got back.
There is glassware. All the specialist glassware is wonderful and lovely. It's, as I've always been told, this is great.
All-purpose glassware.
The bigger the glass, the better. Is what I've always been told. You can go too small. It's hard to go too big, but it needs room to breathe and room for air. I don't spend a lot of money on really, really expensive glassware anymore.
Principally
because I have,
Yes,
and it's all broken.
I have none of the glasses left.
Yeah.
I have one left because it stays in the cupboard.
Yeah.
I've learned my lesson. One of the very interesting things, to get sidetracked for a brief second, about glassware, you can get very similar forms, but hand-blown are much more expensive than machine-made with the stem attached. These have a stem attached. You can feel a seam at the bottom. Hand-blown glassware is beautiful. It's fantastic. It's like buying babies, though. It requires an immense amount of care that I'm, at the end of a night of drinking, not able to do that.
Yeah, huge amounts of care. Also, but I will say, you need a stem glass.
You don't like the
Anytime you're drinking
stemless?
wine, I don't like the stemless
like the
glasses
stemless
at all.
either.
You tend to put too much body heat into it. You're changing the wine too quickly. Heat and light are the enemies of wine. So go with a stem.
I agree. Napa Girl, I know it's a different region, but would any of these Tempranillos pair well with or this cheese?
A Pyrenees cheese. Well, yeah, why not? I don't know that cheese in particular. I think it's just a matter of personal taste again. If you like the cheese, I don't know what kind of characteristics that cheese has. Creamy cheeses, you tend to need something a little more acid to them. The big hard cheeses, you want something rounder and softer. Opposites. Food and wine pairing is simple. Contrast. You want to finish the meal not feeling worn out. And if you do a big, heavy, sweet wine with a lot of heavy fat food, you're going to want to take a nap at the end instead of dancing.
I'm not going to get to the end.
So you want opposites.
So have the recent economic troubles in Spain affected Ribera?
Absolutely. There are a lot of wineries for sale in Ribera del Duero. In fact, that's why Malleolo's has, or the Amigo Nora people have Cepa 21. It was a winery that came up for sale. It's sort of why Vega Cecilia has Allion, although it happened many, many years ago. So there are wineries for sale.
Consolidation. They're for sale, but they're buyers.
All of Spain, all of the U.S., all of everywhere in the world, there are wineries for sale, and they've all been hit. And unfortunately, that trust fund baby thing where, we own a winery, let's go up there for the weekend, that was a lot more work than anyone really expected.
Yes, it's a business.
It's a business.
And
you have to love it.
10-month-a-year business.
What will be the newest trend in Spanish wines?
That's our last question. Ling Prof, you got a question in?
Spanish wines. I have no idea what the newest trend will be. There's so many there's 600 indigenous varietals of Spanish grapes.
That'll be the next trend.
That'll be the next trend. Will be even more and more lesser known vines and phenomenal varietals.
But not out of Ribera.
Not out of Ribera.
It's going to be Tempranillo, 75% minimum for the foreseeable future.
That's all you can grow there. None of these others will grow there. So that's what you're dealing with.
It's home court. That's the home team player, home court advantage. I think the wines really show that it does a spectacular job there. And these producers really know what they're doing, to get the most out. The thing that's really impressive to me is that the three red wines, they're very distinct, but they do share a common thread. You definitely get a sense of place. This is across vintages and across winemakers, which means that the fruit that those vines are producing.
You get the
has something to
relationship
say.
of the grape
Absolutely.
coming through and the character of the grape. And you can't say that about every wine region, even within the same grape, within that wine region.
It's very difficult.
Beautiful, beautiful wines. I love working for this region. I'm a little ADD, and what I love about this is I never hit a point where I felt I've learned everything, because there's always something new in Ribera del Duero, a new winemaker, a new technique, a new style,
A new vintage
voice,
challenge.
a new, like there's a new winery called La Ora that just hit the market here. Incredible wines from La Ora. Then you have Teon, which could not be more different, but another one that just hit the market that is beautiful, beautiful wines, and plus all the guys who've been
We're
here
going
for
to
a
have
long time.
to follow up next year or the next time with an update on those wineries, because we are unfortunately out of time.
Well, listen, thank you so much for this. This is great fun.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. My pleasure. I thank you guys out there for
Absolutely.
joining us. And I know that there was a fantastic conversation going on in the chat room there. And I apologize for my reliance on a faulty Google product. That'll be more and more common in the future, I think, unfortunately. But Kiersey did come in with questions written on paper to save the day. Old school, baby. That's the way we roll.
It's better than a blackboard.
We should have. That's what we should have next time. A blackboard's up there, movie camera. Thank everybody. Drink Ribera, drink Spain.
Our website is drinkriberawine.com. Lots of information there.
Is there a hashtag involved in that?
Hashtag Drink Ribera.
Drink Ribera. Hashtag Drink Ribera.
Yeah.
So all you folks out there tasting these wines, hashtag Drink Ribera. Go tweet. Post something on Facebook. We really enjoyed sharing this evening with you. I hope you enjoyed sharing with us. Hope you guys learned something, and I know you had a good time. That goes without saying. So on that note, unless you have something to wrap things up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Cheers.